Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana, and I'll begin by saying that the material I'm going to cover today is a little bit complex. I'm going to do my best to try to simplify it as best I can, but it's highly involved. So let me start out by saying that a number of folk that I talked to prior to doing this feature, and I've had it in the works for actually since before football season, so given that we've now had 4 LSU games, you'll see how long I've had to delay this because of other matters and whatnot. But in talking with some folk before this, I was absolutely flabbergasted to find out how prevalent it is out there that people are completely unaware that college athletes are being compensated now. So let me just say this, for a long time that was not the case. It would be an NCAA infraction to have paid college athletes, but about 3 or 4 years ago, the Supreme Court deemed that violated the rights for players to be able to earn money on what they call NIL. That's name, image, and likeness. We'll get to that in just a second. And so for the last several years, college athletes have been able to be paid. Now, with regard to in the past when they could not, we had some fairly prominent figures. The one that most notably comes to mind to me is former LSU basketball coach Dale Brown, and in the interest of full disclosure, Coach Brown is a friend of mine. When my mom and I lived in Walden, when we would walk, I would hear a car start to slow down behind us, and I'd tell Mom, that's going to be Coach Brown, and sure enough, and he always pulled over, talked to us. My mom just absolutely loved Coach Brown and his willingness to come, and he could poke fun at me, and it was all good humor. But at any rate, Coach Brown was one who felt very strongly that athletes were being exploited, in that universities were making an ungodly amount of money and yet the athletes were not being paid. There was also, about 10 years ago, former LSU wide receiver Abram Booty was in the process of trying to get a film. It was called Workhorses, that was going to demonstrate the degree to which he felt college athletes were being exploited. Now look, I know there are going to be people out there that are going to be adamantly opposed to college athletes being compensated. I've heard from a number of friends say, look, we give them the tuition, they get a scholarship and this and that. Look, my purpose is not to argue that. In fact, I have absolutely no issue whatsoever with the present scheme, the present mechanism through which college athletes are paid. That is, there's what we call name, image, and likeness. And so they've been able to utilize that by way of going through a clearinghouse. And to give you some examples, many of you have probably seen the commercial for Raising Cane's. I don't know how you could miss it. It involves pretty much the Manning family. You have Peyton serving the drive-thru. You have Archie Manning. Now I'm talking about the grandfather here, who was with the Saints back in the late 70s and 80s. I used to go to the Superdome to see him. He's in the driver's seat. I don't want to go into all the details of the commercial because we're going to provide you with a link for it. But it is a hilarious commercial. I mean, it is really incredible. So rather than go into the details, because I'm trying to keep this feature not overly lengthy, we're giving you a direct link for that feature. But obviously those players are lending their name, image, and likeness, NIL, for the production of that commercial. Another good example is, I don't know if you've seen a billboard that's right near College Drive in Baton Rouge. If you're eastbound, there's been a billboard up there featuring Gordon McKernan and Garrett Nussmeier, who is the quarterback for LSU. And it says, get the G guarantees. And you see Nussmeier and Gordon McKernan there. It's a little ironic because that's exactly why they suspended Eric Gaylord, as he said, get the E guarantee. And they said, you cannot run commercials talking about, any kind of guarantee. But I don't know, I guess you can do whatever you want when you're arguably the most prominent trial lawyer in Louisiana and you happen to employ the governor's son. But I digress on all of that. At any rate, Abram Booty was quoted on the article we're going to give you about him and trying to produce horses. he said, look, I'm not saying college athletes should be out there driving luxury cars, but they should be able to be compensated to some degree. Well, I'm here to tell you, and I'm sure Abram Booty knows this. By the way, I think Abram is now a very successful financial planner up in North Louisiana, so I'm glad that he is doing great. But he's bound to know that college athletes are driving around in luxury cars now. In fact, we're going to give you the top 10 NIL earners from last year. Carson Beck is number 2. He is the quarterback from Miami. And he came in at $4.3 million last year. And when they interviewed him, he said one of the things that was really nice was to go out and buy this luxury car. So we've come a long way, have we not, Abram Booty, from those, well, it's only about a decade ago when he said, look, I'm not saying, I'm sorry, I just have to get the humor of this. I'm not saying they should be driving around in luxury cars. And now we have Carson Beck saying one of the nice things of getting this nice compensation package, I can go out and buy me a really luxury car. So, all right. Anyway, on that list of the top 10, you're going to see Arch Manning. Now, Arch Manning is the quarterback for the University of Texas. He came in at number 1 at $6.8 million. Our own Garrett Nussmeier came in at number 5 at $3.7 million. The only quarterback the only non-quarterback to make the top 10 was number 3, Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who came in at $4.2 million. And like I mentioned a moment ago, this is the free enterprise system, and I think it's a free enterprise system at work and doing well. I have this is me personally speaking, because it is Sound Off Blog and I formed it, so I very often interject my opinions, if you hadn't noticed. I'm all for that. I know a lot of people are not, but for the market free enterprise system, I think this is the way it should work. If Gordon McKernan or Todd Graves want to combine forces and have a private company out there that utilizes these services, the name, image, and likeness of the players, I say go for it, and whatever amount you want to pay, that's good with me. But I'm going to give you a link for an advocate article because effective July 1st, there was a House settlement that enabled colleges to directly pay college athletes. Now that's not been the case in the past, okay? That change became effective on July the 1st. And I'm just going to read a very brief excerpt from that article. You'll see the entirety of the article. And it says, as a result, LSU officials projected a usually profitable athletic department to have an $8 million deficit during the upcoming fiscal year. Zen said LSU will, quote, will work aggressively to mitigate that and could balance its budget by the 2007 fiscal year. It also talks about, and I'm quoting, how third-party NILs could enable LSU to exceed the cap. And if I didn't mention it, the cap is $20.5 million for any university, and LSU has said we will most definitely fully utilize this cap. The cap is scheduled to go up at 4% a year, and it'll be reevaluated every 3 years. Now, the proponents of what I'm about to introduce, because I don't like the legislation that went through this past legislative session. You may love it, that's up to you. But the proponents of it would argue that, well, we had to find a way to keep LSU competitive. Many of you, or many of the sports fans, would know that Michigan's quarterback, Bryce Underwood, he had committed to LSU, but Michigan came along and made him a $10.5 million offer, and so he decommitted. And so there's the belief that, and the proponents would argue, if we aren't competitive in the salaries, or I don't want to call it salaries, strike that word, the compensation that we're able to give to, because they're not employees, that's why I said that, that we're able to give to these athletes, we're not going to be able to stay competitive with the big name schools. That'll result in lower attendance at our games, and we won't be competitive. That has all kinds of downside economic impacts. I'm just giving you the arguments for the proponents. So here's what happened. This is where it gets in the weeds. at this last legislative session, Representative Neil Reiser, and I'll briefly say for those of you who may not be familiar with him, he is the one who sponsored the bill, or sponsored the amendment for the Edmondson amendment that would have raised LSP Colonel Mike Edmondson's retirement by about $50,000. I don't want to get off on all that, but I'm just saying that because this is the sponsor of the bill. Of course, he's doing it on behalf of Governor Landry. The original bill, and we're going to give you a link for the bill, but more importantly, I'm a numbers man, so I like to read fiscal notes on bills, okay? And we're going to put this up on the screen for you. The original fiscal note for the bill, and we're giving you the link for it. What it does, what the bill does is it creates a brand new statutory dedication fund. Now remember, Governor Landry wanted to hold a constitutional convention to where a lot of these statutory dedications could be stripped. It's kind of ironic that now all of a sudden we're adding in yet another statutory dedication, but I digress on that. Again, the bill creates a statutorily dedicated fund. It's called the Sport Fund. Now, SPORT is an acronym for Supporting Programs, Opportunities, Resources, and Teams. So hence the acronym SPORT. To directly pay college athletic programs to fund payments to college athletes. The original bill, and we'll have this on the graphics on the screen, the original bill called for increasing the online sports wagering tax from 15% to 33%, more than doubling, okay? And that tax, I want to emphasize that when the sports betting proposals were first presented before voters about 5 years ago, when all of this became legal, the commercials touted how the proceeds would be used to fund a new bridge over the Mississippi River. Now look, there was no obligation that that's what it had to be used for, but a lot of people voted for this, and hey, we need a new bridge over the Mississippi River. And the tax is presently, this is just the online sports betting, okay? The tax is presently generating approximately $56 million a year. Now, I would argue that that would serve as a pretty huge debt burden for building that bridge, okay? But nevertheless, because heretofore there was no sport fund. This money was not being diverted over to this. But under the original fiscal note, the increased tax would have provided $15.5 million to the general fund. The general fund is the fund that funds Louisiana governmental operations. And then, hold on to your socks now, $52.2 million would go into this sport fund, okay? Well, that original bill, which is what they wanted, what Governor Landry wanted, it ran into heartburn as it was making its way through the legislature. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I was texting left and right. I was not happy about it. I'm still not happy about it, but we'll get to more of that in just a moment. And so that created some heartburn. So I was hoping the bill was dead. But I'll give Governor Landry credit for one thing. He doesn't give up, okay? So they came back and they amended the bill to where now the increase in the online sports betting tax is, quote, only going up from 15% to 21.5%. Now we're going to put this on the screen too about what now would be generated. So the net effect of that is they couldn't produce. You remember they wanted to fund the sport fund at $52.2 million. Well, when they brought the thing down to 21.5%, that caused a problem. It couldn't get them as much money as they wanted to go into the sport fund. So they got a little bit, well, all I can tell you is now they're taking $6 million from the general fund in order to get what they're wanting in the sports fund, which has been reduced down to about, I don't know, $34 million. And at first glance, you would say that, okay, that's going to be $6 million coming from John Q. taxpayer. And that was my first impression too, but upon deeper analysis, I've spent a lot of time analyzing this. It's really not. what it's doing is reducing. Remember, I told you that there was 56 million at present being generated by the online sports betting. Well, that's just going to reduce it to 50 million because they're going to now divert 6 million of what was already being collected. Now, instead of the new tax causing more money to go into the general fund, now it will actually be less because they're going to statutorily dedicate $6 million of general funds revenues to go into the sport fund. Now, even doing that, that's only going to produce 34 million, which is well shy of what they really wanted of 52.2 million. So I hope I didn't get too complex, because now we're going to transition into my unhappiness with this bill and how I have creatively circumvented, or I'm circumventing it, let me put it that way. Look, I have a good friend that says that, hey, Robert, you shouldn't have anything to complain about. It's a voluntary tax. If you don't want it paid for that, just don't bet. It's that simple. And he is absolutely right. You know, I'm going to give that to him. He's very intelligent, been a long-time friend of mine, in fact, for about 35 years now. Very intelligent, very good friend of mine. And he said, it's easy, Robert, don't bet. And he's got a point, but y'all ought to know me by now. I just don't give up that easily. But I'm going to tell you the first thing I did. Now I'm going to start using a few props. The first thing I did, get in front of this and hopefully it'll show the camera. The second it became pretty obvious that this bill was going to pass, and y'all have to forgive me, I'm not sure how much of this is showing up and it darkens. But at any rate, I'm going to leave it for just a few seconds. Hopefully you're getting to see. It's a little bit difficult because the screen is black, but at any rate, what that is what that is showing you is, I said the heck with it. I caught myself on that. The heck with it, and I withdrew all but about $300 of my DraftKings account. In fact, I withdrew $2,414.33. This really, I didn't like this at all, okay? So I'm going to show you how I have chosen to do my best to circumvent it. You can decide what you may want to do. I wanted to have all of the enlightenment I could on it. Remember, the tax only applies to online sports betting, not when you go to a brick and mortar facility. So I'm going to go and use another prop. Now, if you go to, for instance, DraftKings, well, the Queen Casino or LaBerge, that tax is 10%, okay, and it remained unchanged. This legislation did not affect that. So what I've started doing, hopefully I can see this one a little better. This was from this past weekend, and that involved the Florida and Miami game. And again, I'm not able to see what's showing up on the camera, but at any rate, I'm going to explain it, but hopefully I'm catching the key part. And so this was a $100 bet. I'm not about to ever do that on the online. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. If you want to, that's your business. People may want to go open up accounts and start doing this. I took Miami and I gave the 7.5 points. And I'm going to tell you something, that offensive line for Miami, whoo, boy, you know, I last year I bet Ohio State as a futures bet, and it paid off nicely for the fact that Ohio State won the championship. This year, once again, I did a futures bet taking Ohio State. The payoff was about 7-1 if they win. But I'm going to tell you something, based on what I saw with Miami, that offensive line and the dominance, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to beat them. They have a very, very impressive offensive line. But at any rate, that's one way that I'm circumventing it, because I'm just not happy about this. Like I said, the NIL, straight up free enterprise, I'm good with that. I don't like the government getting involved, and especially when we got told that, hey, this money will be used to fund a new bridge. So the next time you're ready to drive over the Mississippi River Bridge and it takes you 35 minutes to come eastbound, you say, hey, look, maybe we got traffic jam, but we got some of the best paid college athletes. And the reality is I very rarely bet on LSU. I do sometimes, but not often. But at any rate, that's one way that I'm circumventing it. I'm going to show you another way. The 2 weeks ago, now those people who know me and know me well know that I'm a big bingo enthusiast. I enjoy my bingo, okay? Well, Coshado Casino, again, I don't know how much of this is showing up, I hope. In Kinder, that's an Indian reservation, so they're not subject to tax, okay? We're gonna give you a direct link for the amendment that was just recently done to the pact, the compact, they call them compacts, that Louisiana has with Indian casinos. It turns out that there was being a tax assessed, collected by the state and then distributed out to the localities. The Coshado tribe said this is in violation of the Indian Treaty Agreement. They filed a complaint with the Department of Interior. Long story short, in January of 2024, they got a favorable ruling, and so now there is no collection. Let me just hit the high points of it. You'll see it in the link, but the amendment removed a provision that required the Coshado tribe to make revenue sharing payments to the state based on casino revenues. The Bureau of Indian Affairs stated that such provisions are contrary to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. So I just showed you I went 2 weeks ago and bet on the Michigan Oklahoma game. Now remember, Michigan has the quarterback Bryce Underwood that I told you about, who decommitted to LSU, went up to Michigan because, you know, they offered him $10 million. So he basically said, all right, look, I'm out of here. But at any rate, I felt like going in to play Oklahoma. Oklahoma is very impressive this year. They have a great offense. But I had to believe, oh, by the way, when you take an over or under, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, you add the two scores together, okay? And you need to, if you choose under, you want the total of the two schools now, not just one, to be under that amount. If you choose over, you want it to be over. Well, the over-under was 44, so I did make a $100 bet while I was there to play bingo, because the month of September they have $11.99 a game. You can kind of figure where the $11.99 comes from. But at any rate, I felt like sending a true freshman quarterback into a hostile environment like at Oklahoma. Yeah, he's a great quarterback, but that's asking a lot of a true freshman. So I bet the under. Luckily, that one paid off too. So far, I'm doing half decent this year. Last year, I actually came out ahead. Not a lot, but I came out ahead. I'm hoping Mike can squeeze that out again. But look, this is not meant for the player, and I know that. Everybody should if you do this. It's mainly, you need to use it for entertainment, but I like to have a little stake in the outcome of the game. That's one reason I don't bet LSU very often, because it's very difficult for me to bet against a team that I've known all my life. But that don't mean I won't do it. Okay, if I think the point spread is such that I believe the other team's going to prevail, factoring in the point spread, I will most certainly do it. I think I've shown you that in the past. Some folk may have said, yeah, we saw it with Alabama. Alabama doesn't have what they've had in years past. So once Saban was gone, and things took a little bit of a nosedive. But at any rate, let me just say this in wrapping up. A while ago, I mentioned that I withdrew all but about $300 from the DraftKings online account. And you said, well, why did you leave $300? And I'm going to explain that right now. They will offer these, I'll have to come back to the camera again. They will offer these incentives, and in this case, and y'all excuse me if you're not able to see much of this. I have no idea, because it's blocking the actual camera so I can see what you're seeing. But in this case, DraftKings offered I believe it was a 33% profit boost. But those bets are very, very limited. Usually the maximum you can bet is $10. But anytime you're talking about a 50% profit boost or a 33% profit boost, that actually tilts the odds to be in the player's favor. So yeah, I'm going to do that, okay? Now, I took Auburn +7 when they played Oklahoma this past weekend. And I had the darn thing won, you know, but those of you who watched the game saw that Auburn gave up a safety right near the end of the game. So it became a push. It was a 7-point game, 24-17, which means I didn't lose, the house didn't lose. It was a push. Now, for those who bet right before the game went off, because the line at kickoff had actually dropped to 6.5. So for those players who took, I'm sure they were aggravated because the game went from a 5-point game to a 7-point game when Auburn gave up that safety. So there you saw an enormous amount of money for those folks go out of one group's hand and into another group's hand. But hey, that's the way the cookie, as my mom used to say, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So I'm going to wrap up this feature. I hope I have enlightened you on what is going on here, all the way from hopefully if you knew nothing about the sports betting. And look, there may be people out there, like I said a moment ago, you may say, I think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't have an online sports betting account. I'm going to open one and I'm going to start betting so that money can be provided to LSU. Now LSU will they're going to do the max on the $20.5 million cap. Obviously other schools are not going to be able to do that. And I don't know out of the $34 million, I have no idea how it's allocated to which schools get how much. That's for higher pay grade folks that do this full time as part of their job. But at any rate, if you love it, that's great. Go out and open an account and do it. I can just tell you that the folk that I have spoken with, I know of several people that shut it down. They said, that's it. I'm not doing any more online sports wagering given this. I've tried to give you the shed light on the whole situation. I know the video was a little long. I knew it was going to be when I first set out to do this. But at least now you can make an informed decision. And you now know a whole lot more than I think you knew before you started watching this video. So I will, since I won on this $100 bet, I will look at the games this Saturday and decide which one I may want to go ahead and put another $100 on. I'm going to drive to the Queen Casino. Only took me about 8 minutes to go in there, go to the kiosk, spit the ticket out. I'm having to hold on to this one. I had to take a picture of that one from Coshado because naturally I had to cash it in, and I don't get out there that often. But I'll be back over that way, and I will certainly make any sport. My point is I am scaling down the online betting to next to nothing. But if you'd like to knock yourself out and help contribute to this, I invite you to do so. I hope this has been informative for you. Sorry it was a little long. This is Robert Burns, and we look very forward to bringing you another Sound Off Louisiana feature in the very near future. Thank you so much.